Very much so.
I think there's a presentation that needs to be projected. Okay, so I don't have control of it, right? Muniba, do I have control of it? Or I can basically nod my head and you can change it for me. That might be easier. Muniba, I can nod my head when I want you to change. So when I was asked to speak, I must say I'm not really a public speaker, and no, can we stay on the first slide? And we've heard the discussion, Lagos, an evolving organism, and I'll see how I'm going to manage reading from my phone and pressing at the same time. Okay, as all protocols, thank you very much, sir. I can do what Falana did so easily. You can tell he's a great orator. He was just, my phone goes off. So, I've written something down. I'll just read. I just said, what is Lagos? The place known as Lagos has been in existence for centuries. I will try to give this paper by restricting it to my personal experience that I have had, having been born in Lagos some 60 years ago. The name Lagos comes from this Portuguese explorer Sequeira, who in 1947, when his ship ran aground on an island, he noticed that the island reminded him of a place of his birth in Portugal called Port de Lagos. So he actually named it Port de Lagos. It was the British that named it Lagos. You know, they changed everything. The name Lagos comes, like I said, from 1960 to present day 2023. Lagos has had 21 kings, from King Ado to King Rewalekola. And we've had Portuguese influences. We've had the advent of the emigrants, the Saros. We've also had the Christian influence, and of course the colonial era. Our people just before that, the colonial government and of transportation, but this shows you how Lagos started. This was the quality of how Lagos started, and it's good to see it still standing on Campbell Street today. I'm going to just basically use pictures to describe how I see Lagos evolving from where I come from. So like I said, in 1963, this was the only bridge out of the island. Lagos is a series of islands. You had the Ikoyi Island, you had Lagos Central, you had mainland. But this and it's interesting that Carter Bridge and the area he was nicknamed for have a synergy together. And you can see the order of the bridge. You can see coming across the bridge. Omolankes pulling things over the bridge, because Ido was the original port where most of these things that came into Lagos was scrapped, and they used to literally push them over the bridge. And unfortunately, that still happens today. Although the new Carter Bridge that was built later did not envision that. So they actually do that on the road, and that causes a lot of traffic. This is a museum in Oniko. I just put that picture there because in those days in Lagos, this is where people went to. The museum was very active. The building is still there, but it's also good to know that as Lagos has evolved, Lagos State have built the new Yoruba Museum right across the road. So you can see there's a synergy between the two. This is still part of the museum. This building is very important. It's called the Old Secretariat Building. And it's an amazing building. It's a listed building, thankfully. But of course, in the 1950s, it was a Secretariat building and then became the Federal Ministry of Justice. I don't know if any of you watch Netflix. There was a movie, some hotel, that they used this building as the center, and it was quite interesting. But the building is still standing. This is an example of colonial architecture. It is still existing. Since I'm talking of my experience, my father was legal advisor of Ministry of Justice, and I remember going to that building as a kid and talking about Lagos and the way we've evolved. In those days, a civil servant couldn't go back to the ministry at the weekend without permission. You'd be stopped at the gate by a sentry, somebody dressed up, and you'd write your name in the book, and he would escort you to your room and see what you wanted to do and leave. So these are the values that we had before, and we still do have. So talking about the evolvement of Lagos, this was the kind of quality and caliber. I put this road because I'm going to discuss about the development of Lagos. This is Turnbull Road. This is the road that leads to Banana Island today. You can actually see very serene, trees, no fences. This is how the residents were residential areas. And the reason I'm mentioning this is to discuss what I'm going to explain to you, planning. Master planning was very important. I know I have some senior street up to Tinubu Square, and you either made a right up to Idumota or you made a left to Akwongbo. But if you went to Akwongbo, there was no eco. Older brother and cousins, they'd come here and have picnics. And the Ikoyi Park was also, many people don't know, was also used for drainage. The road I showed you, Turnbull Road, I remember there used to be what they called the floodgates. So once the rainy season came, the Turnbull floodgates will open, and Ikoyi was drained all the way down towards Turnbull, and it will drain into Ikoyi Park, and then from there to go into the lagoon. So you can see how over time the destruction of the urban environment causes part of the problems we have today. And that I'm just trying to give us a sense of where we are coming from, where we are now, where we need to go back to in order for us to continue this progression. Western House. Western House, this is an old, I showed the old dilapidated building because this is what it is now. But Western House was one of the main buildings built on the Broad Street just before independence. The main building we all know is Independence Building, but Western House too was built. So, development of Lagos, involvement of Lagos. This is an old map of Ikoyi. I used Ikoyi as an example because I wish I had a pointer, but I don't. If you look at this picture of Ikoyi, this road here is Alfred Rawani, which was called Kingsway Road. So you can immediately notice there's no VI bridge. So VI bridge did not exist. That is Ikoyi Park up there. I will show you another map of today, and you'll see that Ikoyi Park has become Parkview Estate, Banana Island, everything else. And of course, we also have the link to Lekki. For those of you, there was no Lekki in the 60s. Lekki did not exist. It was just water. There was no Lekki at all. So you look at the water. So basically, this is a typical map of Ikoyi. Showed how it developed. And like I said, the road, you have Osborne. You have Gerard. This is where the building collapsed in Gerard. That is Turnbull Road. Became Alexandra Avenue. Then it went to become Bodilon. Became Awolowo Road. And from Awolowo Road, you move through Broad Street and through the urban interventions of Falomo, Oniko, and Tinubu Square, ending at Idumota. So this is the map of Lagos today. Most of the developments have been sand-filled. They've definitely solved our problems due to population, but unfortunately, the planning and development of these new spaces have not gone in consonance as they were done before. Even places like Surulere were well designed by the LEDB, properly designed. I went to see a friend last week at Jalokmo Avenue, and I was shocked to see that the Green Park was still there. You know, Jalokmo was an amazing place when it was developed. So you can see this is the new Lagos today. We now have our Eco Bridge. We also have our Dolphin Extension. We have our Lekki, and of course, the famous Banana Island. VI has grown all the way to Morocco, and of course, Eco Atlantic. So, why do I show these plans? I show these plans because in as much as Lagos evolves and grows, as architects and young architects, we need to understand master planning is key. And there was a master plan before that had been distorted. And the question is, how do we solve some of the problems that we envisage today? Why do we have collapsed buildings? Why do we have areas that are meant to be residential and are now commercial? Why do we have power failures? If you look at this old picture that I showed you, this is Ikoyi, for example. All the houses were on 1 acre. All the houses want one television, 2 air conditioners. The electric cables that were laid then were laid for those amenities. What's happened is Ikoyi has developed, but the infrastructure has not followed. So a building that was designed for 3 dwellings and most probably had 5 air conditioners and 1 TV now has a 20-story building on it. If you multiply effect, that's why our transformers blow. That's why our cables blow. So you can do generation, transmission, but without distribution, there's nothing that's going to happen. You will continue having, so you can see how the urban environment is very important. And one thing I try and tell is that at the discussions of development, the architects must always be at the table. We are always called in at the end. We are not called in at the beginning. I had a discussion with some financiers about power generation 10 years ago, and they gave me a song and dance of how we will no longer use generators. 10 years later, we're still using generators because even if you generate more power, the infrastructure, unlike mobile phones, which is in the airwaves, has to be physical. So that is part of the problem that we envisage, and we need to try as much as possible to see how this will run in consonance with our development. This is just an aerial view of Banana Island, well planned. You can see Ikoyi is well planned. I'm going to show you some aerial views of the master plan of Lagos and show you how planning can be distorted This is just a general map of Lagos. I wouldn't bore you too much with that, but it just shows some of the Apapa ports are there. This is central Lagos. For the architects, CBD, I'm sure you've heard the word before. The Central Business District is a central business district. As we evolved, Lagos evolved. By the 70s, by the time the military came, the Central Business District, which was where everything happened, central banks, all the banks, they allowed planning to be given to people in Victoria Island. They allowed planning to be given on Awolowo Road, and they started distorting the master plan. They said that, what does that do? That creates traffic, because before, all of you converge into the central part of Lagos from your residential area of VI, Apapa, and Ikoyi and Surulere. But now, you have residential areas everywhere. So it's quite difficult for you even to control development. Security is a problem. Transportation is a problem. Because you now have to have transportation. You have people working. People are working in Ikoyi on Gerard Road. People are working inside Lekki. People are working in VI. People are working inside Surulere. People are just working everywhere. So you can imagine, how do you control the transportation? It's very difficult. So the point I'm trying to make is that as Lagos evolved, the distortion that came with different elements within its development. This is the National Stadium. National Stadium was a major intervention when it was built in the 70s. And with the National Stadium came some housing. If you go into Surulere, you'll see some housing as you drive in. Those houses were actually put there for the builders that built the National Stadium. But we're talking of 40 years ago, and people are still maintaining and revising that same building. Those buildings need to be demolished and replanned because the use is totally different. Of course, we all know the Murtala Mohammed Airport. Lagos was the capital of Nigeria before, so we enjoyed most of this infrastructure. But of course, most of them are dilapidated. This is an example of the sprawl of Lagos. This is Orile, Ajegule. You can see the difference in the organized planning of Ikoyi and even Lekki and Surulere. So these are just natural developments because we have a housing deficit of 22 million in Nigeria. People just go around and do and develop it as they like. But for an architect, this is a beautiful piece of canvas. Imagine demolishing this and replanning this. The planners will love this. Housing estates, new Ikoyi parks. If we organize all these spaces, the amount of commerce that's going on in here is unbelievable. Farhan talked about taxis. If you remember what they did at, is it when Rem Koolhaas apparently came to Lagos and went to Oshodi. Apparently they said he knelt down and prayed and just said, wow, this is a terminus. Oshodi was a terminus. They were plotting here, they were eating food, they were reading newspaper, they were renting places. Things were going on. There were trains, but it was a major terminus. The intervention done there by Lagos State is good, but could have been better. But at least it's good. But it shows you that CMS is a terminus. Obalende is a terminus. Most of us have been abroad. We've seen Victoria Station. We've seen, they are all terminuses. So we need to understand this space replanned. You'll be surprised how many people could live here and what could be done about the sprawl called Orile Igomu. This is Ilukweju. So you can see this is not Ikoyi. This is Ilukweju. This is how it was done then. And look at the layout. This is an aerial view. But it shows you that proper planning, proper density, coordinating, and this is all Lagos. So it shows you that Lagos has these pockets, and Lagos was heading in the right direction, and Lagos can still head in the right direction. Now, this is Yaba, organized. This was the major residential area because in the 50s, only Europeans lived in Ikoyi, but most of the prominent Nigerians, and you can see the planning, it's like a grid system. It's actually very nice. It's a lovely grid system, but of course it's been overbuilt, buildings have been demolished, and again, but you can see, because I'm working at the National Stadium now, when I need to leave to go back to the island, because the Eko Bridge is closed, I have to go through railway compound, cut through a compound, and go through Yaba. Quite organized. It's quite a grid system. Easy to actually find your way around. You forget. You don't realize how orderly. So we can learn from areas like this. Of course, the ports, very important. The ports, the livelihood of Lagos. Tinkan Island and all. That supports. And you can see the beauty. I mean, Lagos from the air is beautiful. And you can see it's well planned. I mean, that's the marina there, the Apapa. I showed you this slide because I'm going to end up by talking about regeneration. And I'll explain to you. If you look at that slide, you can see the marina there with all these tall buildings. And you can see Apapa here. I'll explain to you. This is beauty, marina. Beautiful. There's been arguments about the outer marina road destroying central Lagos. I actually think it did. Planners, because originally when you drove through Lagos and you drove through Broad Street, it was alive. Once they built that outer marina, most of us abandoned Broad Street. We kept boycotting Broad Street, and of course, it's been taken over by you know who. But I still think the CBD is the only place, and I believe the government should encourage multinationals to move back there, build your high-rises there, because there are spaces there. And if that becomes the CBD, you will immediately solve a transportation problem. Because CMS will become the heart, everybody will come there. I would walk. I wouldn't have to take a taxi to go to CBN, to go to the ministry. My first job at 15 when I left St. Gregory's College was work at Niger House. And I remember walking down the road to have lunch. But it was all orderly because that was the CBD of Lagos. That's another picture. We can't abandon it. I think this is the famous Quayside, Kingsway Road. But you can see there's still a lot of potential to encourage people, maybe with tax breaks, to all the banks, build your head offices there. That will immediately solve part of our problem and start to give over areas back to residential areas. Again, you can see the difference from the back. That's the mosque. The sprawl, again, of Lagos, Igai, Gudoro, all those areas need to be replanned. I know Lagos State, under Governor Fashola, did a beautiful layout of replanning those areas. I don't know whether it's still on it, but I was privy to see some of those plans with lovely courtyards, lovely spaces, lovely public spaces. But this, for architects, again, like I said, we love things like this because a plan, we can regenerate it. We all remember Canary Wharf in London. Canary Wharf was abandoned, and look what it is today. The prices have gone up. With the Jubilee Line extension, that's the place to live now. So, the regeneration, again, if you look at, when you're in Lagos, to go to Apapa, you literally have to go all the way around to go to Apapa. It's like a curve. And people have been toying with building a suspension bridge from Marina to Apapa. What does that do? It immediately gives, Apapa is a beautiful place. It's just very difficult to get to. The traffic, the trailers. If you could create I don't know, Golden Gate Bridge over the marina, Apapa now becomes another beautiful area that we can use for development for both low and high cost housing. Yeah, this is the building. That's, of course, the house. That's the house of the Prime Minister. You can see the cricket ground. That's the cricket ground. The famous TBS, King's College, and of course, the courts that are being rebuilt now, the Supreme Courts that are being rebuilt. Again, another view of Lagos from the air, showing some of the green spaces that we've kept. Of course, our spaghetti junctions that, again, you can see some kind of orderly planning along there, down there again. So, the famous toll gate, as Lagos expanded, what we got, as Lagos expanded towards Lekki, the toll gate, this is Lekki. Again, well planned, organized, not much green areas, but you can see there's a semblance of order. Maybe again, we need to control the use. This is Lekki Phase 1. This is Lekki Phase 1 as well. And of course, by the time you get to Phase 2, you can start seeing more orderly development because you now have the big developers that are doing stuff like that, all the same. And I think the only thing is we need to control them, the quality of build. I had a client that took me down Lekki to see from America. They bought this house in Lekki. And I must say, the construction was so poor. But guess what? Before they even finished building one block, people had flower plots. People are buying and moving in. The requirement for housing is just so much. It is a lot, and we need to get our mortgage right and the quality of build right. But they are off-takers. They are ready to move in and take them. We just need to control the quality of the developers. And like the son said, architects must be involved in everything. Architects must be involved. This is also Lekki Phase 2. As you can see, it's expanding and moving. And of course, the famous third mainland bridge. So, in conclusion, Lagos, the involvement of Lagos, you can see from the quick slides I've shown you that there is an order to Lagos. Yes, it has been distorted. And I spoke about colonial times. I spoke about Portuguese times. We've also had a period, for those of you, the younger generation, of the military. I don't know if there are any retired generals in the house, but I believe the military destroyed everything about urban planning because Awolowo Road, for example, you're able to get planning approval from Abuja, and that's why you have those high-rises on Awolowo Road. But of course, with the intervention of Lagos State, Supreme Court rule that have now said planning approval can only be given by the state governor. We're able to control that now. But I think we need to start to think of regeneration, especially central Lagos. There's a lot of space there, and that is the culture and the heart of Lagos. If we can encourage the CBD to be regenerated and the places by the palace and Ido to be regenerated and replanned, we might start to solve our immediate problems. But the main thing is proper planning makes it easier for the planners to be able to control building. When there's no proper planning and you're not sure what is meant to go in the right places, it's easier for developers and professionals alike to cut corners. But well, in my 60th year on earth and in my 60th year living in Lagos, I must say I am very, very happy. I see there's a massive future, and I believe the younger architects should. I tell my architects that when you move around, open your eyes. Because when I ask a question regarding if you walk down Bodilon Road, what do you see? If you walk down Surulere, what do you see? You need to open your eyes. You need to make sure you understand that Lagos has a lot in terms of the physical infrastructure, but the urban intervention, as in the public spaces, is very important. I know Lagos State are building a lot of playgrounds and parks, but again, it's been done arbitrarily. I implore my town planners here, and of course, Lagos officials too, we need to revive the master plan. We must revive the master plan. We must get the state government to revive the master plan and bequeath it to the younger generation. In my final year of architecture in England, a master plan of London was done and put at the Royal Academy, a huge model of the whole of London, from all the developments they were going to do, up to the train stations. And I must say, in the last 30 years, they have actually done them. But the new areas we're seeing today were developed 30 years ago with a proper model that was presented in the town hall, and everything, all the tall towers you see in London, they were envisioned as blocks. But they knew all the height densities, the shapes, the use, and that was made into a charter. And people like Boris Johnson, and Mayor of London, and Ken Livingstone, they just followed that master plan and they just continued it. So it's important that we regenerate the Lagos State master plan, and we have our coordinated developments. And so the young students, I hope all of you qualify as architects. I still think architecture is one of the best professions in the world. But picking up from my final word from what the SAN said, architects, we need to protect our turf. We do not protect our turf. I love what he said about lawyers. Architects need to protect their turf. And we need to teach the students that you are not called an architect until you are registered. The word architect is protected. So all of you must make sure you do your part 1, your part 2, and your part 3. So you can hold your head up high and say you are a registered architect. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Architect Laoye, for this brilliant exposition on evolution of Lagos. We've seen how organized Lagos can be, and we hope we can take the opportunities for regeneration and replanning very seriously. At this point, we will hand over the session to the chairman of this session, Architect Science Laoye, who will moderate us on the questions and answers that may be directed to Architect Laoye. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, what a way to start. Architect Laoye has really done justice. He has fired the first most important shot of the LAV 14.0. Can we give him a round of applause once more? It was very interesting going through his submission, where he has taken us on a journey of about 60 years ago to the present time, analyzing and x-raying the evolution of Lagos as a city. And what a nice way to do it also, because they said seeing is believing. I take the presentation with slides and pictorial representation of the evolution of Lagos very seriously and very interesting. It will leave an everlasting image on the minds of all of us that have been privileged to go through your presentation. So I would want to now give an opportunity for the audience to ask some questions, while at the same time calling on the presenter to get ready to take the questions, at the same time prepare some kind of rebuttal or round up to the presentation eventually. But for now, I would want to see by indication of hands up those that would want to ask questions, and I would give them numbers. Okay, hands up. I should expect more questions coming from the students' angle, but let me start with, okay, you first, number one, and then number two.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Second Vice President of the Nigerian Institute of Architects. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank the presenter, Architect Laoye, who through his speech or through his presentation, discovered that we have a lot in common. All right. My name is Laoye Olushola. I'm an architect, and I was also born 60 years ago like you, and I went to the same St. Gregory's College like you, and I studied architecture like you. So you see, we have quite a lot in common. But that's not why I'm holding the microphone. Up, Gregs. All right. Very beautiful presentation, lovely, and I was actually salivating for more, and that's why I raised my hand very first, because I wanted to hear more about two specific issues. The first one is we have seen Lagos being presented to us, and I was wondering whether that was just the presentation of Lagos or Lagos State. I would have loved to see the entire state, evolution of the entire state. Lovely places, and the good, the bad, and the ugly, but much more to the Ageges, Ikorodu, Badagry, and so on and so forth. At least snippets of those major places we know, Ekpe, Alimosho, and all of that. perhaps if it is possible to talk on the evolution of such areas of Lagos State, because I see Lagos beyond Lagos that you and I knew, and perhaps some people, when they talk about Lagos, maybe that's what they also know. But Lagos has grown far, far bigger than the Lagos we knew growing up. I grew up in Isaleko, Idumota and all of that. But I left Lagos quite a long time ago. The second part is you showed us a picture of an iconic building, and I was wondering what has become of that and what Lagos State thinks about that building. They may say it's out of their jurisdiction, but I think we need to hear from them what they think about such a waste in the heart of Lagos State. And I'm talking about the National Stadium. There was a passing picture that was shown, and you spoke about perhaps the housing around it, and that was all. But I would have loved to really know, as architects, we can't sit here and not talk about such a waste. Recently, a light mast fell through a thunderstorm or something of that nature, and that stadium had been there for over 50 years. If I recollect. So these are the areas I would want you to recap or rehash on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Up, Gregs. We must have been classmates. I guess you are quiet, or I was quiet. We'll catch up after. Very quiet, actually. If I was just speaking to Town Planner Inde as well, I think I was very clear with my presentation, because I knew it was a very wide discussion. And because I had 30 minutes and I was talking I didn't want to expand too much. But you are correct. The Greater Lagos is also very, very important. And we can get a space where we tie the Greater Lagos to the areas I showed. And I spoke a bit about the Lekki direction. And of course, that Lekki direction now goes all the way up to Ekpe. You have the Dangote refinery. You have Lagos business schools. All those places do not exist. And I was down that route a couple of weeks ago. It is unbelievable. The development is wild. I mean, VGC did not exist. Even VGC, even Chevron, even Chevy Park. I mean, there's just so much that's going on there. It's just unbelievable. And with this new coastal road that Eco Atlantic is building, going towards Landmark, it is a continuum. So I do agree with you. We need to try and tie up that urban intervention. How does it relate to the core of Lagos? And you mentioned Ikorodu Road. And I was actually going to remove it from my speech. I remember as a kid, when we were born, I actually lived in Palm Grove before we moved to Ikoyi. And getting to Ikorodu Road from Ikoyi, apparently my parents told me they were extending Ikorodu Road in 1963. One of his first, it was a tiny road, and that extension was a major intervention in 63. From Surulere all the way to Ikeja, it caused unfounding traffic. It would take you 3 hours just to get to the road. But this was part of the development then. I mean, it has now been increased 4 times and 4-fold. And of course, at Agege, we had Super Cinema. We used to go out, there was Metro Cinema, Penn Cinema. So those areas were there. So I think, yes, I do agree with you. I wanted to concentrate more on the core, but clearly an overall master plan. That's why if you look at London, when I mentioned Canary Wharf is basically as far out as maybe Mushi, but it has been developed and it has been tied by the railway. You mentioned the National Stadium. I am privileged to be the architect working on the National Theatre. So I know what it takes to see an iconic building just go into degradation. The National Theatre as a building, all of us remember the National Theatre. And basically, we were architects appointed to work on the environs of the National Theatre. They wanted to build a creative village for the 5 verticals that the youth, music, film, IT, fashion, Those who wanted to build. But when we went there, the sponsors, the bankers said, if we're going to spend all this money, are we going to abandon the National Theatre? It's just there. So I was told to go inside. To get inside the National Theatre was like going into Fort Knox. Because yes, the DG will not let you enter. No, I have to go to Abuja. No, I can't enter. I must go to Abuja. But I just want to go inside. No, Abuja. Go to Abuja. That I had to get, yes, we had to get Abuja to get us in there. When we finally got inside the National Theatre, my word, it was as if some posh, as if they just locked the door, took the key and left it for 40 years. But I can tell you now, with the intervention of course, the President, Minister of Information and Lagos State Governor and the Committee of Bankers, we have spent the last 3 years refurbishing it into what it was 40 years ago and better. And by God's grace, it shall be commissioned at the end of the year. So I know, yeah, it was an amazing building. It was, the vision of the leaders then was different. And the builders that built it, I mean, Julius Berger was their subcontractors. The foreign company that built it. And the building they built after National Theatre was Eco Hotel, to show the quality of the build. So I think the National Stadium is something, again, it's an iconic building. I believe federal government, Lagos State must ask for the National Theatre. But the question we should ask ourselves as Lagosians and as architects and planners, do we need the National Theatre? Sorry, the National Stadium in its state. Do we need a 60,000 stadium next to Taslim Ilaya Stadium? Who plays in the National Theatre? Or do we need a sports complex? So does the main bowl go? Do we redevelop the whole area, create some housing, create some parks? Maybe. We don't necessarily have to redevelop it as the national, because clearly it has no use anymore. It does not. Most of the games are either played in Abuja. Even if they play National Stadium, it's such a massive infrastructure that we cannot even maintain it. So I think that is a question as developers and as architects we should ask. Should the National Stadium be redeveloped? Yes. But what should it be redeveloped to? I don't believe the running track and the main bowl, 60,000 seater, I don't think so. That's my own, based on my experience with the National Theatre, there are some things we will do differently now when I look at that area. So yes, I know they've done the National Theatre. I know the Minister of Sports, who is a Lagosian, is trying to get that from the government so they can also, but it will be important that NIA Lagos and NIA ensure that we are involved in that process. And like I said, the architect should be at the top of the tree. Architects are always called in at the bottom of the tree. All decisions have been made, and that's one of the things I was not happy about when they were going to refurbish the Supreme Court that was burnt. We had to send a message to the governor. You had bankers, you had accountants, you didn't have any architect, you didn't have any planner at the beginning. So I think he now made the intervention and ensured they were at the table. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but yes, I do agree that National Stadium should be refurbished, but the idea is, what should it become? I don't think it can be the same. I think that time has passed. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir.
Number 2, you can ask your question.
I'll just stand here.
Thank you very much. My name is Olaniyi, and my father's name is Okedele. I'm a retired, but not tired by the grace of God, from University of Lagos. I'm an architect as well as an urban designer. I'm happy, that your presentation has brought out a lot of things. And I'm happy that I sat down with our former commissioner for urban and regional planning, Lagos State, who happens to be my ano. So I have to dobale for him. Now, it's my comment to look at the solution. Yes, you identified those areas in education, we call it structural method of looking at. But I was discussing with him, professionally, supposed to be looked at as a general More so, when Lagos State was, involved. Lagos was the capital of Nigeria, but when the administrative, was removed, then Lagos now became a Lagos State. In urban planning and urban design, we look at urban areas, city, metropolis, megapolis, and Lagos State can be called megapolis. Megapolis as metropolitans. And the way we develop it, that is where we mess up. I'm happy, the former commissioner, is here. We are very close to each other. We mess up. We look at things structurally instead of looking at it gestalt, if I can use, the word that's psychology, in a gestalt way. And professionally, how do we look at it? We call something regional plan. Regional plan before metropolitan, before urban master plan, before action plan. It is in stages like that. But instead of looking at it from global, we start, from individual. And the coordinating thing is what, we all say. For example, what my brother said, that's, Surulere, National Stadium. That National Stadium was done purposely because of one issue. That was in the middle 70s.
All African Games.
All African Games. Then politics came into it and messed it up. Why should Lagos State